Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 16 of the Snapshot. We are your hosts. My name is Brendan Patrick, and I'm joined by none other than Marvel Snap phenom Cam Best. The Snapshot is a Marvel Snap podcast focused on the competitive side of the game, and for episode 16, we're joined by Moyen, who has been absolutely dominating the tournament scene recently. We discuss the recent Snap Battle results, his 11-0 streak at the best of the besties, and dive into tips and tricks on how to crush battle mode. Let's get into it. All right, Cam, your week in Marvel Snap.
My week in Marvel Snap. Enjoyable, but definitely feels like a down week in terms of, the card that came out was Snow Guard, not very good.
Okay.
Got me thinking a lot about how hard the Series 5 situation makes it for them to release bad cards, right? Like, Snow Guard is a card where it's like, if you got it in Series 3, you'd be like, oh, this is a cool card to have. But the fact that it comes out in Series 5, even if they don't intend you to buy it, they're still hanging that price tag on it, and it's still this awkward spot because, like, they'll see this response to Snow Guard. They'll be like, oh, man, nobody bought that. And then there's, like, these other incentives that come in after that to be like, oh, well, maybe we should make better cards in Series 5. And then things get power crept. It's just, like, the way acquisition works in this game feels like it has some underlying issues, and I think Snow Guard is a good way to represent it. So, like, that is one of the things that's been on my mind. I did expound on this a little bit. My most recent YouTube video is about Snow Guard and this issue, just sort of trying to get some thoughts off my chest, trying to figure out exactly how I feel about it. And basically, I wonder if the series acquisition model does not sort of put them in some awkward spots design-wise.
So, Snow Guard is a 1/2 that says, while in your hand, this transforms into a hawk or a bear. The Snow Guard Hawk says, on reveal, ignore all location abilities next turn, also 1/2. And the Snow Guard Bear says, on reveal, trigger the effect of this location. I agree with you, Cam. I think the Snow Guard is really cool in terms of design. You have a card that's morphing into other cards while in your hand. That's a cool concept. But Series 5, no way, Jose, am I spending 6K tokens on this? Honestly, dude, I'll tell you the real of it. I am collection level 9,000 and change. I have been around 8,000, 9,000 for forever. I have over 25,000 collector tokens, and I don't spend them because as soon as something's broken, that's when I'm spending my money. Other than that, I'm waiting, right? If the Series 5 card isn't in an S tier deck, I'm not going to buy it, but I'm also not a content creator like streaming every single day. So I guess, that's why I kind of have that economy. But I do think it's funny that I've ended up in the system where, I did whale initially. I did. But now I just kind of pool these collector tokens and I don't buy anything at Series 5 unless I think it's busted. Snow Guard, unfortunately no good, but cool design. I would like to see more design in that space. Doesn't necessarily have to be Power Group, but I hope they do figure something out in regards to being able to release more fun, cool cards at Series 5 that aren't just freaking busted, because at that price point, it feels like it's got to be busted.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's like you're releasing to an audience of card gamers, and like card gamers are sharks. Like they want to shark people. They want to be optimal. They want to play everything perfectly. And it's like, I don't know if this model works for that. And it's definitely something that's been on my mind recently, for sure.
Well, in better news, Cam, we had a series drop, and a pretty sweet one at that. Series 4, Series 5 to Series 4, we had Stature, MODOK, and everybody's favorite one-drop Ghost. Series 4 to Series 3, this is the big one, by the way. Series 4 to Series 3, Super Skrull, Shuri, Black Panther, Bast, Valkyrie. Ooh, I got the name right.
So we all know that everyone's favorite 4-drop, probably the best card in the game, definitely the best card with the 4/2 stat line, Super Skrull, has finally made it to Series 3. Let's go!
Finally.
No, Shuri's going to Series 3, and she's almost certainly eating a nerf on the 18th. Remains to be seen what the depth of that may be. I personally do not expect her to eat a super significant one. I think right now she's pretty okay in terms of balance. Just like, it's possible like that other nerfs can bring her back to prominence, so I do want to see her toned down just a little bit if possible. I don't mind Shuri decks being the best deck. I do wonder if they could just get rid of her entirely and like really make everyone happy. I don't know if that's a good design strategy though.
Yeah, what do you think of Stature, by the way? So I don't follow too many people on Twitter.
I love her. Yeah. I love her so much. She's not like exactly that good, but I love her so much.
I follow this guy, Raven, who is a Hearthstone caster on Twitter, and he constantly tweets out his Stature deck, and he like puts it in like the meta tier list, and he like photoshops it on top and like all this stuff.
He's a genius.
Stature,
but yeah, no, Stature's awesome. I love Stature. Like, I have been a Stature truther forever.
Yeah.
I just think that, like, she was always a card where it's, like, never going to be worth the price tag because she's never a tier 1, but you can make decks that compete with her, but you're never going to want to take those decks over other options.
I almost bought her at tier 5, so I might buy her at tier 4, but then again, I could just
I did buy her at tier 5. She's, like, very close to... she's good, man. Like, there's like if Shuri eats a nerf and we end up having to change that deck around, one of the directions I'd like to think about going is the Stature, Sauron, Ebony Maw direction. If like that ends up becoming more plausible, like I really like her.
All right, in our final news here, Cam, we had a freaking awesome bundle get released. And I saw that variant you pulled, the Dan Hip bundle, with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. Pretty good, eh?
I think it's a weird, bad bundle. I ended up buying it because, like, I think it's a bad bundle on value. I'm not actually sure. I didn't do the math. Don't listen to me. I'm an idiot. I bought it because the Devil Dinosaur avatar looks extremely funny. Mm-hmm. He's got, like, eyebrows going down to here, and it's, like, zoomed in on his face, and he's making, like, this face. And like that was what swung me over the edge. The fact that I got a gold foil, gold Kirby Crackle Devil Dinosaur, splitting that icing on the cake. It's probably the best variant I own right now.
Yeah, I know. I saw some discourse about asking whether these bundles actually support the original creator. Obviously, a lot of people like Dan Hip and the
they
variants.
should though, right?
Yeah.
Like they you think like I don't think they do, but assumed, they really should.
It's assumed that there's no sort of profit sharing or anything like that. And I would say that that's a likely assumption. That being said, it is more likely than not that if a specific artist's bundle is bought more, like Dan Hips is like by far the most successful, they'll probably do more releases with that artist. But I think that's right, as far as the support goes.
That is true, but it's also like, hey, wait, like their name's on this.
Yeah, it would be. It would be nice.
Licensed it, but like I really do think that they should look into doing some sort of profit sharing, even if it's
like 1%.
Even if it's like super minimal. Like I've been introduced to all these artists. Like what's interesting is like, of all the Marvel properties, Marvel Snap is probably the one that does the most for Marvel as a comic property, because it gets people like, I didn't know who Art Germ or Dan Hip or Rian Gonzalez were, but now there are going to be people who like buy prints of their work because of Marvel Snap. And like that, it's probably done more good for them in that sense than like I know these people aren't working on like the MCU, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you think of like a Marvel property that actually helps the artist, I guess Snap might be up there in a weird sense.
Dude, it's one of my favorite.
But I do think they should absolutely do profit sharing with that. That would be super cool.
So one of my favorite things about Marvel Snap is the variants. Like, I don't know, putting a gold border around something is not a variant. That sucks. You've seen Hearthstone has now responded and they've created like real variants, but actual alternate art variants being like a norm in this game, pretty awesome. The price, maybe less awesome, but it's awesome. I love that you can have a collection that is somewhat unique that you identify with. It's amazing. Last thing here, Cam, just a quote from Glenn and regarding MMR. So he says, I just want people to know, because I read it and I was like, okay, we talk about this all the time, but here's from, the mouth of somebody that works there. You're paired based on your MMR within bands determined by your rank and collection level. Your MMR is meant to reflect your skill in game, which includes how effectively you gain cubes. As you continue playing, you'll play a lot more close games because your MMR has gotten accurate enough that a majority of the opponents are as good as you are. As you get better, the opponent you're paired against will also be better, so your climb will be similarly challenging even as you improve. I think that system might not scale till once you get better and better, as they say. But yeah, that's straight up from them. So it's like it's a band based off your collection level, and then
we've known that.
Yeah,
we've known that.
Yeah, so it is it's It's interesting. It's interesting. I saw some. I don't
Discord. Like the part where your climb scales. Like why can't I just play rank 70 players, dude? Like that's the thing that sucks. Like the fact that like the thing that I don't like about that is like, okay, so because I'm good at the game, I now have to struggle harder than someone who is bad at the game. Yes. And because like that's bad for the content ecosystem, because I'd like to be like, oh, look at my rank like deck I got rank 100 with. Look at all that. Look at that. Look at the cool things that I did with this deck, right? And then like someone who is much worse than me playing against much worse players, like how are we supposed to evaluate what infinite means?
Yes.
And of course, this is all irrelevant because the bots aren't there, but like is anyone supposed to know this deck is actually good? How is anyone supposed to say something with weight behind it?
Ladder and Marvel Snap has zero competitive integrity. Like absolutely zero. Not only, obviously, we know the extremes, which is bots, but the fact that there is skill-based matchmaking at like 80 and you're both 80 and you're both the same, it's ridiculous. Analogy here. One of the worst things that ever happened, in my opinion, and some people probably disagree, but I don't care, to the Call of Duty franchise is like old school Call of Duty. You queue up, you play a game, right? So you get better at that game, you start frying lobbies, dude. It feels great. But nowadays, they have skill-based matchmaking. So what they do is they put you against harder people, but they also put worse people on your team. So you get equalized into this just like average experience. I don't think that's
bad as long as it's what is being represented by the numbers.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think it's great to have skill-based matchmaking as long as that's what's being represented by the number next to your name.
So this is an unranked.
And right now, the issue... I think the issue is not there is skill-based matchmaking. The issue is 80 is not 80.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense with it doesn't make sense with the rank system. Like we could just have no numbers and it'd make more sense. It's so freaking
It would make
bizarre.
Perfect sense if there was no numbers, right? like that's the issue, right? The issue is 80 is not 80. 100 is not 100. Two people having the same rank doesn't actually mean anything right now because they could have wildly different MMRs because of this system, and that is the issue.
Cam,
that is what is the issue to me.
What do you think that I've seen some discourse on Twitter about queuing into counter decks and whatever and all that? Do you think that exists?
No.
Yeah, neither do I. Because I don't know, it's not like I don't know. I feel like it's also. So
here's I'll give you a minute. I'll give you a minute on this because I don't want to get sucked into this.
Seconds.
But the amount of work it would take to actually pull that off versus the returns it basically makes that kind of thing very unlikely. The amount of work it would take for them to understand what decks counter what other decks. It's not exactly as simple as you have a bunch of ongoings in your deck and your opponent is playing Enchantress because there are a bunch of decks that play ongoings. Look at Cosmo and Armor and Shuri decks, and Enchantress is basically useless against them.
Destroy.
Like it's not as simple as like looking at look, there are a bunch of big cards in your deck and I play Shang-Chi because like, oh, you shuried a Vision. Oh man, that's actually crazy. That Shang-Chi is really useful, but it wouldn't have seen it because Vision is only 7 power. And the fact remains that even if you accept the premise that a company wants to keep you at 50% win rate to make your climb challenging, which I do accept that premise, MMR already accomplishes that goal. They already have something in the game that keeps you artificially at a 50% win rate, regardless of what rank you are, regardless of what skill you are. Look at that quote from Glenn. It's like right there in your face. They already have that. They don't need to do like some sort of advanced AI matchmaker to give you specifically bad matchups.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I agree with you, Cam. There's no deck-based matchmaking, but the skill-based matchmaking stuff is bullshit. Well, you know what? It is. Go play tournaments because that's pretty much the only thing
that's totally fair, right? Like, this is one of the things that bothers me about the deck-based matchmaking thing is like there's so much that you could complain about how this is bullshit that's real and like dev confirmed and like right in front of you. And there's like so many different things that you could be like, this is bullshit about, but instead you do this is bullshit about a thing that isn't real, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, just go play tournaments if you're like dealing with a really terrible ladder system right now because it does break. The ladder system really doesn't work at the higher ranks. The matchmaker is rigged against you. Okay, go play tournaments. They're not rigged against you. Go win those. Goes 08 in the tournament. It's like, God, how did they figure that out?
Tournament matchmaking is also rigged against me, you see. Like, I don't know. I just don't know. Like there exist avenues to do this. I don't want to be like too dismissive of people because I do think that like on a fundamental level, feeling this way is probably the most human feeling that we can have. Mm-hmm. Our brains were born to evolve. That's word salad. Our brains are built to recognize patterns and make inferences. Mm-hmm. And the issues that we have as humans with understanding that there are actually not patterns in random numbers, those are the kind of things that $1 million industries, $1 billion industries are built around. You could argue that the fact that the human brain is meant to perceive patterns is sort of why casinos exist, is because we trick ourselves into taking negative value propositions because we think we know something about them, even though what we actually know is that they're rigged against us, right? Like that's like there are multi-billion-dollar industries built on exploiting the fact that we see patterns where there are no patterns.
Yeah. Well, 99% of people quit gambling before they hit big, so I think that's the real issue. Anyway, Cam.
Yeah, it's all these people log on to Reddit and complain, but if they just played more, they'd get the good matchups. They just need to keep pulling the slot machine.
Keep switching your deck. That will help.
If you keep switching your deck, you keep it off balance.
Confuse the algorithm. All right, the Bend and Snap section. This is from Good Dado Mighty this week. Says, question about making content. Do you think a certain collection level is needed to dish out content? Twitch.
Yeah, and it sucks. It's one of the major downsides of Marvel Snap is that I don't feel like we can get as many new creators into the scene because you have to start out making like 2 months or 3 months of content, or you have to shell out for the pro bundle and then shell out to whale, and then you can maybe compete. But it's like, it's hard. It's hard for someone who has never played Marvel Snap to break into the scene without several months of work.
Yep. Totally agree.
Sucks. Wish it didn't.
Even if you whale, it's going to take a while. And I think that I remember I had a friend, he was like, oh, like I'll just do content that's me climbing through collection 1 and 2. I was like, that's maybe a video. That's maybe one video, and I don't think it'll do super well. Like, unfortunately, that's just not what the appetite seems to be on YouTube and Twitch. So yeah, it is unfortunate. Hopefully the only way they can fix that is just reduce the goddamn prices already. But, we'll get there eventually. Anyway, if you want to get your question read out on next week's podcast, shoot us a comment and question on YouTube, and we'll get it read out on next week's pod. Anyway, with that, Cam, let's head into that main topic.
Our guest today is Moyen. Moyen won my $500 Best of the Besties tournament. He has consistently been crushing these open tournaments on Saturdays and Sundays in Marvel Snap. Arguably the most decorated Marvel Snap tournament player for whatever value you put on that at the moment. It is true. And he is one of, in my opinion, the best players in the world. So I am very happy to have Moyen on the Snapshot.
Yeah, welcome, Moyen. I have to start out by asking this question because it is in your Twitter handle, which is literally right below your face, Moyen HS. Mm-hmm. What is your card gaming background before Marvel Snap?
I started playing Hearthstone competitively in like 2017, 2018. So, and since then I competed a lot, but every year the Hearthstone esports scene got less lucrative. So I had to, then I started playing less and less, and I had to eventually stop because it wasn't worthwhile. But in 2018, I won a playoffs, which was the tournament before Champs, which was the tournament before Worlds. And in those Champs, I was 2 sets away from making it to Worlds. But I threw a game, and that cost me. And actually, I went, I calculated the EV of that set that I threw, and it was like 50k. Oh. So I was very sad after that.
That always feels good. Well, how do you feel moving from a game like Hearthstone to Marvel Snap? Marvel Snap is kind of like a card game, but I feel like they really switched up a lot of things with the synchronous terms, short game span, this cube system. How do you feel competing in a game like that? And does it hit some points for you as like a person and a player that maybe Hearthstone didn't?
I love the simultaneous turns. Mm-hmm. I hated waiting in Hearthstone when, you can't think about your opponent's turns you can't think about your own turn during your opponent's turn. But at some point, you've thought it all through, and you still have to wait, and waiting sucks. In Snap, that's not really the case, so that's a big plus for Snap.
Yeah, there's a kind of a niche, a little bit of a tangent, but in Hearthstone there is roping. In a Marvel Snap, at least how it works right now, it is somewhat objectively correct to rope, isn't that right, KM? Where you can kind of get an advantage. Since you guys have been playing battle mode, since you've been crushing tournaments, is anybody employing that strategy? Are they kind of roping to the last second and snapping at the last second to try to get their opponent?
Yeah, so I've not been doing it in the early rounds of a tournament, but once the stakes are somewhat high, I need to do it to play optimally.
It's
So-
optimal. Like you just
Yeah.
if you want to win, you do it. It's how it works.
So-
like
The reason why it's optimal is like during the turn, your opponent's not necessarily thinking about what should they do if they are to be snapped on. And then if you then snap on the final seconds of the turn, they do get some extra time for their turn, but they have less time to make on that decision. Do I want to stay? Should I not stay? So they're more likely to make the wrong decision.
Yep, if you give them 15 seconds instead of like 90 seconds, basically, because they get that extra extended time, but only that extra extended time.
Do you all think this is a bug or a feature?
Feature, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's a feature, and I'm not even quite sure what the perfect workaround for that is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, you could have the workaround where as soon as you snap, they get the exact same the turn timer added on top of that, but that would also slow down the game. So I think they know that, they're aware, and they don't want that.
Yeah,
I think there's an inflection point at which, because I do feel I have felt rushed by late snaps.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a number that isn't the entire turn, but that is sufficient to actually give you time to think and not panic through it, right? So I don't know what that number is, but like maybe just try buffing it to 30 seconds instead of 15 and see if that just works better. It might still be optimal to late snap, but I feel like the more time you have, the less of an incentive there is to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, you should just be, even if your opponent's not snapping, if you don't have anything important to think about, you should be thinking, should I retreat if they snap here? So that you're already prepared if they do the late snap.
I feel like,
and you should also be doing this so that you don't give away information by playing fast when you have good stuff and slow when you have to think. Like that's the other upside of just having a static turn timer and always playing it at the end is you will give away information on turns where you have to consider stuff if your opponent knows what you are considering and knows what the fact that you have to think about it for a while means, if they can get a read on you that way. And over the course of multiple battle modes, they probably can.
Yeah, I think that this happens a lot in ladder, and it's what we've coined as boomer snaps, which is people will immediately snap on a specific turn, usually the last turn when they have drawn that card that will win, and it's like abundantly clear. It's like, yeah, I'm out. There's no question. They definitely have the card here. You were saying, Moyen?
Oh, it reminded me of an important set I had in the Hearthstone playoffs, where I discovered a card. If you know what a discover is, it's just you get 3 options and you pick a card. And there was one card that was almost game winning. It was a secret, so also if they play into it, it was almost game winning. And they kind of didn't have an option to play around it anyways. But I knew if I insta picked, they knew. So I like volped and tried to make my opponent think that it was like a hard decision. But I don't think they fell for it. They just didn't have a choice to play around it anyways. But they got so mad that I volped that.
In regards to the feature, I feel like Second Dinner has like a hierarchy of needs when it comes to Marvel Snap design. And I think that increasing game length, duration, queue times, all of that is just so far at the bottom that, yeah, I also agree with it. I don't believe it will be changed, at least at any time soon, because like you said, if you just added on some additional time, it would slow down the games potentially a lot. And that could be a huge problem. We've seen the Second Dinner definitely doesn't want to do that. Moyen, I want to ask you, what do you think? Go ahead.
Hold on. Have we? They released Kang. They released Daredevil. Like, there's clearly some willingness to push the envelope in terms of that, at least in the form of card design.
In the form of card design.
Why is there unwillingness to do it in the form of competitive balance?
Yeah, I think I was extrapolating from how strictly they've adhered to the matchmaking parameters, even though they're clearly broken, in order to prioritize quick games. But yeah, I mean, in terms of card design, you are correct. We had Magic, we had Kang. So it is potentially something that could rework. I think that it's affecting a very niche and small amount of the player base right now. But when Conquest mode comes out, I think that it will affect a much larger portion of the player base, and other people will see it as an issue.
Yeah, I think that's one potential solution where they keep it the same way on for ladder, but if there's like an inbuilt tournament mode like Conquest coming, they could implement it just for that tournament mode.
Mm-hmm. Moyen, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts about the competitive integrity of Marvel Snap and competing at it just as a player, do you think that the game is sort of skill based enough that it's something that you feel like you can sink your time into and the input is worth the output? And how do you feel about how that variance spread is? Do you enjoy competing in Marvel Snap?
Well, I love competing in general, and I also love competing in Snap. I must say it is not as deep as Hearthstone maybe is, and it's easier to play games optimally in comparison. In Hearthstone, it was almost impossible to have like an entirely optimal set of games. While here it's possible. I think the biggest reason why so far I've been having a big edge in tournaments was not that I'm like doing insanely crazy plays. It's also that most of my opponents are not very good at the game. So like
I mean, this is how it is, right?
As soon,
Most
but
people.
Yeah, but if we get let's say a good incentive for esports and people to actually become good at the game, my edge will drop because other people will also get better at the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's one of the things about the early tournament scene, right? It's why I said, like, for whatever that's worth to you, the early tournament scene is very much, I think it's something Jeff Hoagland has talked about, where it's just like, yeah, if you offer like a $5,000 prize pool or a $50,000 prize pool, compared to a $400 or $200 prize pool, you're going to get a very different quality of player because a very different amount of people and a very different level of player will find that worthwhile to commit to.
Mm-hmm.
So far, I maybe played like around 10 of these cash tournaments, and I feel like I won like 5, 6, top cut, and 2, 3 more. That shouldn't be possible if my opponents were also very good at the game. Even
right.
with variance.
What are some facets of your play that you believe make you a good player that maybe some other players are not currently implementing?
I think one thing that's not being thought about enough is what hands you and your opponent are representing by doing certain plays and by doing certain snaps. Other than that, in the final turns of the game, but also before that, there's a lot of thinking where you figure out what of my plays beat my opponent's plays.
Mm-hmm.
What of my opponent's plays beat these plays that they're expecting me to do. And then so you have to do all that thinking, and there's not a lot of time in Snap, so that's actually a difficult thing to do. And then you could think, oh, maybe I should always do the play that beats most of my opponent's options, or the most likely of my opponent's options. But that's not always true, because there's also the point that they are thinking about your plays, and if you're doing the play they're expecting and they have a play that beats that, maybe it's worth going one level further.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to use an example here in a scrim that Moyen and I were doing. He had two plays. He had 2 plays. One was an Ultron and one was an Abomination, right? And I was aware that I would lose if he played the Abomination instead of the Ultron. And at that point, it just became a question of what level does he think I'm on? What level am I actually on? I played to beat the Ultron for whatever it's worth. I was like, I'm going to play to beat the Ultron and I will lose to the Abomination. And he correctly identified that he played the Abomination. He correctly identified what I was going to play around and played the Abomination. I think right now, that actually, like we talked about biggest tournament edge, I think going to that level is your biggest tournament edge right now, because you are able very, very, very realistically to be like, I am pretty damn sure Cam is exactly good enough to play around this Ultron, but he's not good enough to do the next thing, right?
And
it's like...
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, no, it's fine. And it's like, I feel like you and Lambie will routinely make these like 20%, like they only beat like 20% of my plays, but the play I make is in that 20% consistently. And it's one of the things that I think I noticed the most about the way a lot of the top players play is right now, like, let's say I'm on like level 0 play would be the Ultron. Level 1 would be the play I made to beat the Ultron, consistently level 2. And no one's really pushing you higher, right? No one's really pushing you to loop back around and actually playing to beat that Abomination.
And that situation, I just wanted to say, because it's a really good example, but it's a very simplified example. It gets much more complicated than that, because I knew all the cards in your hand because you had Modok, Swarms, and then and Java as object. It's like you didn't have a lot of possible plays, and I knew exactly what cards you have. And these situations can get much more complicated if you don't know what cards your opponent has and have, and if so, what cards would they play. Oh, there was also one more example that we could talk about that's happened in the KM Best tournament, where I think it was in the finals, and the finals was a Shuri mirror, and it was a Kamatage game. I was behind on tempo, and they after the first 3 turns, they had more power on the board than me, and they could just play Shuri on Kamatage, and I also had Shuri, but if we both play Shuri on Kamatage, my follow-up, even if my follow-up is good, there's the chance that they have the same follow-up, and I'm just in a losing position. So, and my follow-up wasn't even that great. So I think my opponent was supposed to snap just representing the Shuri, and I kinda can't afford to stay, because I'm just losing, almost just straight up losing an extra cube if they do have the Shuri. And I don't want to pay just to see that. But in the end, they didn't snap, which made me think if they did have Shuri, at least then they would snap. Even if they're supposed to snap without it, that's fine that they didn't. That's like a small mistake. And because they didn't do that, I knew that they were trying to hit my Shuri with their Cosmo. So then I Shuri'd and not Kamatage, which dodged the Cosmo and won that round.
Mm-hmm. This
I
game
remember
was
the
chicken.
exact play he's talking about.
This is the most interesting thing about high-level Marvel Snap, in my opinion. And for those listening, if you want to get a video or a visual version of this, you can go to KM Best and a Snap YouTube. There is a highlight video of me, unfortunately, where KM. What? Sorry, did I say the YouTube wrong? But you're remembering. I can see your face.
No, I thought you were gonna say if you wanted a video of the tournament, because the tournament's on my Twitch channel. But you're talking about the Shang-Chi play.
Yes. So I queued into a little of the actual real KM Best on ladder, and there was I was playing Null, and there was a very clear Null winning lane. But no, I was like, KM Best is too smart for that. It looks like he's got the Shang-Chi, so I played it in an off lane, and lo and behold, Mr. KM plays the Shang-Chi in the off lane and totally dunks on me. I think I saw you like shoot a 3 from in the back. You're like, oh,
yeah,
it was great.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing though about the high level plays. Like it just, the depth is sort of dynamic based on the player skill, and it adds a lot of layers to what is I think at the surface, somewhat of a simple game. So I really enjoy that. Go ahead.
I want to jump off that word simple, because I do think Snap is like, when you talk about Hearthstone, when you talk about like all the things you have to play around because of the way that randomness in Hearthstone is backloaded, I guess would be the right way to put it, right? Like it's hidden a lot of the time. Discovers, you don't know what that card is. You don't know what the things that are going to happen are. Whereas in Snap, the randomness is front loaded. It pops up on those locations. You see the randomness interact in the game. And so I think that's what makes it so much more possible to play like this in Snap versus in Hearthstone.
Yeah. One more thing for the Hearthstone versus Snap. So while I think Hearthstone's like almost impossible to play perfectly, the punishment for not playing perfectly can sometimes just be like minus, like I don't know, 0.2% to win that game or something.
Yeah.
While in Snap, if you do a mistake, it can be very backbreaking. So
yes,
you have to also play close to or optimally. Also for the KM Best tournament, if people want to get good at the game, I did a 1-hour analysis of just the final on my YouTube, which is Moyen Snap.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we'll definitely link that in the description.
Oh, that's interesting. Your YouTube is Moyen Snap, but your Twitter is Moyen HS. See, this is the other reason I wanted to have you on here, is so we could eventually bully you into changing your Twitter handle.
I probably have to do it, but Hearthstone is so much history and good memories.
Yeah, the HS stands for history. The HS stands for history, actually. It doesn't stand for Hearthstone. It stands for history. For those of you, that's what it stands for.
Yeah. So in this Snap Battles tournament, you guys did play a format with banned cards. So specifically Leech, Thanos, Shang-Chi, She-Hulk, Shuri, Sarah, Electro, Moon Girl are banned. What do you all think about those kind of formats? Do you think that banning, 8 cards like this makes it more interesting, and did you enjoy it overall? And would you like to see more tournaments like that?
You go first.
Okay. I think it's good because it provides a new meta that you have to figure out, which is a very important skill that I also enjoy trying to figure out, a new meta instead of the one that everyone's been trying to figure out anyways. But I don't think you need to do it before the actual meta is like figured out. Even at this point, when we know kind of what the best few decks probably are, I think the meta is at this point it's very close from being stale. But I think once the meta is stale, it's a very good option to keep tournament scene exciting, to have some bans included as well.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out here to What Am I, who went 8-0 in the Swiss of the Snap .fan Open, and then I think finished second in the overall tournament with a deck absolutely nobody except him is playing. Like, when we talk about the meta being stale, I think it's less that the meta is stale right now and more that people are sick of it, right? People that aren't like us are like really sick of dealing with Shuri and Thanos. And I think that is when, like, I think you're right. That's when this kind of stuff can be helpful. One thing I do want to especially shout out is Binks's pick ban format was awesome. And I want to say they did not get the video out in time, but they are working on it. And I'm going to have that on my YouTube channel so you can watch me and Binks making the picks. Because there is like genuinely, I think, a decent amount of strategic depth to that format that I otherwise would not have experienced in Marvel Snap.
Can you
like
explain
both Binks
the
and
format for the people who are listening?
The way it worked was we did a ban. It went in snake order, right? So I won the coin flip. So there are 4 bans at the beginning. I get ban number 1, he gets 2, 3, I get 4, and then pick 1, right? And then he gets 2, 3, and I get the pick, and then the next ban. It goes like that. So there are a total of 5 bans for each player, and then the rest of it is picked in snake order. So think of it like a MOBA draft. That's sort of how it goes, right?
Yeah.
And it was definitely a place where I felt like, I will say one downside of it, though, is it felt like I kind of won in deck building. Like, after my first couple picks, I was like, oh, I have this. There was a really interesting bit late where I felt like he could have pivoted into a Hela deck that I could never beat. But he ended up not pivoting into that Hela deck, and it was fine. Like, it was like right around pick 5, I was like, you know, if he goes Hela here, I actually just entirely lose because I can't really counter pick that. Once things had already gone based on what had already happened in the draft, but he ended up not going Hela, and I do think I enjoyed that format a ton. I really wanted to give it a better showcase though, because once we get that video edited of the pick ban, and then we can show the game afterwards, I think people might actually be interested in that. I don't know if it's viable, but I know it's fun.
Moyen, what are your thoughts about the current state of Series 4 and 5 and how it affects competitive integrity? So for tournaments that are open to Series 4 and Series 5 cards, it can be, I guess you can make the case, it's prohibitively expensive or hard for the average competitive player or person aspiring to play those tournaments to attain potentially very powerful cards and very powerful decks. What do you think about that system, and do you think it's sort of hurting the competitive scene?
I actually kind of see it as a non-issue because I'm not a big spender. I'm buying the season pass, and that's basically it. And I have been playing the best decks in tournaments, and I still have like 14k tokens. And that's not to say that there's no issues with the system, but I think if all you care about is just being competitive and having the best decks for the best cards for the best decks, so that you can play those, I don't think that's very hard to do once you are maybe close to pool 3 complete, or if you're pool 3 complete. But that does mean I cannot spend my tokens on any cards that I think would be fun to play. I don't want to waste my tokens, but so that as soon as a new card is released that I think will be involved in the best deck in the game, that I can just instantly buy those.
Well,
so for example, let's say in the last 4 months, what were the best 3 decks? I didn't play much in January, February, but I think it was like Zabu Darkhawk, right?
You still don't have Darkhawk.
Yeah, because I didn't play then. So yeah, but let's say in the last 4 months, the best cards involved Darkhawk, which is pool 4 plus. Then there was the time where Shuri was the best deck, and then there was the time where Thanos was the best deck. And all these decks only needed these 3 cards from pool 4 plus. And I think if you only spend your tokens on that those aren't hard to acquire. Oh, She-Hulk as well. was for the Shuri deck.
She-Hulk by the time for at least part of Thanos' dominance, yeah, She-Hulk cost tokens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I think what's impacting competitive integrity maybe a little bit more is that there will be times where you can't, where you will be restricted if you're completely free to play, because then there's the season pass cards that you just can't play.
Yeah, I'm really happy you gave that take, mainly because I have spent a bit of money in the game to acquire a lot of cards that are maybe not competitive as well. But I have a lot of friends that play other card games competitively that look at Snap and they're just like, they think that they can't play the game or they won't be able to compete. And it's good to hear that someone who is just buying the season pass, so not completely free to play, is able to compete at the highest level and consistently acquire the best deck. Because that's sort of the music to my ears, because for me, it's a really hard sell and a hard argument, or it has been, to try to convince some of these people to be like, no, you can play the game. Yes, it's a bit annoying for a bit while you get pool 3, but after that, you do your dailies, you maybe buy the season pass card, and you're good to go. Do you have anything to remark on that, KM?
I think that is good if you're Moyen and disciplined enough to do that, right? Like if you are able to quickly and correctly identify what the things you should be spending your tokens on are, and then spend those tokens optimally, yeah, I think you can do that. But I think a lot of other people maybe don't necessarily approach the game that way, and will find that, okay, I bought this card because I love it. I love the character or whatever. And now, because I love this character, I'm gated out of competitive. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like, while that does sort of leave people who, like, I guess there's like a counter argument, which would be like, would those people seriously be competitive anyway? And I think I would say, maybe. We'll never know, right? Like, there are going to be people who are left out by this system because they didn't enter it with the kind of mindset that you have, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that would be my worry.
So the problem. So if you are doing the correct decisions just for competing, it won't hurt you much. It's just you will have to make a decision between fun and exciting cards and competing at the highest level, and that's not an optimal thing for the game. Oh, but one more thing on the money spending on card games. I haven't played many other card games, mostly Hearthstone, but competing in Hearthstone was way more expensive. You could acquire all cards for free, but Hearthstone's collection system is region locked, and there were tournaments that were on different servers. So, then you had to actually gather a collection on Europe, on NA, and on APAC. And there were expansions. How many expansions a year? Maybe 3, 4. I don't quite remember, but most of those expansions I bought like a bundle because the packs were cheaper there for like $50 or $80 on multiple servers. And that's a lot more money that I'm spending right now on Snap.
Wow. That's a crazy system they had. But it is interesting to hear the take that competitive Marvel Snap is cheaper than Hearthstone used to be.
Well, it's cheaper than, what is it? You're grinding for a ladder finish in 3 different regions.
But like, at least we can say it, because I think when we look at Snap and we look at Hearthstone, it's like there's like this Stockholm syndrome where it's like the Hearthstone monetization wasn't nearly as bad as Snap is. But ultimately, I think the second dinner just scales back some of the prohibitive level of costs that they put on these cards, and we can live in a much better world. I do want to ask you, Moyen, what do you think is the biggest thing holding back competitive Marvel Snap right now?
I think a couple things. So one is probably no spectator mode. So even third-party tournaments, you have to go through a lot more trouble in setting up a nice viewing experience because we don't have that, and then people have to stream on Discord or you have to have the high quality setup where people stream on OBS to a server that you set up just for that. So it's a lot of work to go through. And if we had a spectator mode, it would be a lot easier to run tournaments. Maybe the Marvel IP is holding it back a little bit because if for official tournaments, maybe that's holding them back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think furthermore, I personally think Second Dinner is probably waiting to see how like on waiting to evaluate how much interest there is in esports or in tournament scene by just gathering information on maybe how well third-party tournaments are doing before they put their own money into it.
Yeah, I was gonna.
I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Cam.
I have long been sort of a believer that the purpose of tournaments is to create content at this current stage, right?
Yep.
Like that is why they exist, right?
Mhm.
And I kind of wonder if Second Dinner doesn't just look at this and be like, do we need that? Like, do we actually need to do any of that? Like, when you look at the companies that recently invested heavily in tournaments as content models, Wizards with the Magic Pro League, Hearthstone with Grandmasters, you saw both of those models just be like not particularly. What's interesting is it almost feels like when the companies themselves recognize, hey, tournaments are content, and then they try to make tournaments content, they become worse content. I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but that's what it feels like.
Because a lot of it becomes...
once the company is like, yo, let's do content like that, then they end up being less interesting, and I'm not entirely sure why.
I think a lot of those tournaments become nepotism based, and they lose like the spirit of what a real tournament is and what people are actually looking for, which is aspirational content, something that gives content to a game that effectively now ends when you hit infinite, right? But if you add another layer onto that, which has an unbelievable amount of depth, which is just competing against the best players and being showcased and recognized for it and creating a platform that people can do that, it creates something to aspire to. And I think it adds a lot of depth to the game. The problem with tournaments, and we saw this with Magic and Wizards, and I am talking a little bit out of my ass because obviously I don't know the bottom line, is that it doesn't hit the short-term bottom line, right? It's not like they're actually profitable, but you're investing in the future of your card game and you are effectively creating a level of content that can be used as marketing. And I think that it's effective. The problem is for me is that I know that I'm heavily biased, and that if a game has or doesn't have it, it has a huge effect on me. Honestly, before I think about sinking my time into something, I look at what I would consider to be the end game, right? And the end game with a lot of card games and a lot of, I guess games like this is tournaments, is playing against other people. So I think it's really important. I know it's important for me as a player, but yeah, there's a question here, which is, was Marvel Snap even designed to be competitive? No. Can it be competitive though? Because Hearthstone, I think, also wasn't designed to be competitive. I'll just ask both of you, do you think that Marvel Snap is a game that could function as an esport? Do you think it can be a competitive card game?
I don't want to answer that because I don't know how, like, I'll be honest. I think something like Conquest Mode will shape a lot of my opinions on that. Like, I don't feel like Marvel Snap as a competitive esport is something that's all there yet. And that's because it's not all there yet. like when I say it's not all there yet, I'm not saying it can't ever be one. What I'm saying is what we have right now is not the final product that they want us to have in terms of player versus player battles, right? We're playing on like an alpha version.
To me, it's something we can only speculate on, and it wouldn't be the same esports experience as other games. It could just be a little bit more casual, but still have an like somewhat casual esports scene. I think that's also valid. Oh, also, I on the other point, I think esports is just basically advertisement for the game long term, and I think that can be profitable that way. Even it's just hard to evaluate because you don't just see its effect on numbers that easily. But I think why it really is advertisement for the game is because it gives people something to strive for, as you said. Like every player of a game could watch a tournament and they could think, hey, maybe I could be that guy, or maybe I could be doing those plays, and it gives them something to work towards. So, on the same note, I'm not very informed on the Magic Wizard League, but I think it was similar. I think then when those companies decided, hey, we want this, but we want the esports scene for content, then it kind of turned these leagues to compete in into something you cannot strive towards. For example, in the Questmasters League, I could talk hours about this, but so when they introduced the Grandmasters League in Hearthstone, they retroactively said what the conditions were to get into it. After the qualification period was basically done, they were like, okay, if you were top 8 in points over the last year, then now you're in this league. But they said that
Wizards
after the
did
year
the
was
exact
over.
same thing.
Yeah, the
If you're wondering,
MPL, which
the
is
Magic thing, yeah, it did the exact same thing.
But it's worse.
Okay.
I think it's worse. I think it might actually be worse. The MPL was terrible.
Yeah, and then also, I think the other slots were basically just big personalities, so that it's better content. And then also, every GM season, at least at the start, there were only 2 players that were relegating out of it, and 2 players that were getting in. So basically, it killed the dream because it's no matter how good you are, it's not profitable to strive for one of these 2 slots because of how much variance there's also included. Like it was only so before that it was worthwhile to just compete if you're good enough at the game, but at that point it was only worthwhile if you're a grandmaster, which killed the dream of what it killed the entire soul of esports. To me.
Magic.
There was not a lot
something.
of reasonable. Like I think one of the things that should be brought up here is the people that are attempting to do this are often very analytical minded. And they'll look at things in terms of EV. And so when you say kill the dream, right, what you're actually saying is like what happened is it became a negative EV proposition to try super hard to get one of those 2 spots. And yes, all the people that would try to do that are people, anyone good enough to do that would be thinking about it in those terms, basically.
It's like when before it was accessible and it was actually advertisement for the game because people wanted to strive towards it. And then if it's no longer accessible, that basically makes the esports, even if there's big personalities included in the league, that makes it worse EV because it's no longer the same advertisement for the game.
What I wonder is, do you does it, I guess my whole thing is like, does the concept of the streamer league or whatever, does that have to be the same thing as the esports? That's what gets me about it. Like, couldn't you just do what Snap Battles did and be like, here are some streamers, go watch them play a game, and then not have that also be the pinnacle of your esports scene? Couldn't that just be a separate thing?
Definitely.
Like,
absolutely.
Like when you,
I've never seen that done, like
when you think about like UFC cards, right? Yesterday, UFC was headlined by Max Holloway and Arnold Allen. It wasn't like a pay-per-view. It was just like, but these are like not, like Max Holloway is a big name, but like this is like not, people are still going to tune in to watch because they like the person. They like Max Holloway, even though he's lost to the champion 3 times and he's never going to be the champion again. Like that is like, they're still going to tune in to watch because they like that person. I just wonder if there's like a model for that where it isn't, let's take our competitive scene and make it a streamer league, but they can be 2 different things that exist.
Yeah, and if I can play devil's advocate, I would say with grassroots tournaments, I think that they might feel like they might feel cornered into doing that right now because a lot of content is actually 2 parties trading exposure, right? And when you do a streamer tournament, whoever's hosting the tournament is trading the streamers for their audiences for exposure, where if you did have an open tournament and you did maybe get people who are very good at the game but didn't have as big of an audience, it just would be hard at this stage of what Marvel Snap is. Is that the future? I think absolutely not. And I do agree with you that they should be. I think that there's room for both, right? Some people want to go watch their favorite streamer go compete. They don't care if it's like, is this the best player in the world? No. But at the same time, if that cannibalizes like true tournament play, it does kill the dream. And, people that are striving they play the game to try to get better. They play the game to try to be the best version of themselves that they can be in it. And you kill that dream. Yeah, I think that they can be separated for sure. One thing I do want to say though is that when I look at Magic and when I look at Hearthstone and I look at esports and I look at spectating a card game, I think that Marvel Snap is infinitely better. I think it is clear what the cards do. They are simple. Everything is visual. The animations are fun. The games are short. Like, it is digestible. To watch a game of Hearthstone or Magic, the amount of domain knowledge you need on what the cards do, the interactions, and even the high-level meta is extremely high. I don't think that is the case in Marvel Snap, at least to have a baseline level of enjoyment with the game. Do you all agree?
I think that's true, if only because Marvel Snap, unlike those other games, actually has a number on screen that tells you how well you're doing, right? Like it's not an exact science, but you can see, oh, they made a play that really swung that lane because the number got bigger, right? Like in Magic, they tried for a while to have this thing called the advantage bar, where it was just like the casters would be like, oh yeah, this person's winning, so we'll move the bar over to them, right? Like it is something that like a lot of esports lacks. Like if I don't know what I'm doing here, how do I know who's winning, right? Yeah. Like how do I have any idea who's winning here? And I think Snap, it's not going to be exact. It's more like an approximation of who's winning because of the way many decks play out. But you can see someone go from winning to losing in real time. You can see that happen and you can see it play out. And I think that's like actually a very like in terms of being more spectatable, I'd argue because there's no spectator mode, it's not. But in terms of the future, yeah, it could be.
Yeah, I think the card visual representation of what it's doing is also super clear, very articulate. So like you can see Dr. Doom dropped. You don't know what it does, but you see it dropped in 2 tokens in the other lane. You're like, oh, okay, I understand what that is. And like you said with the numbers, there's honestly nothing more boring than watching an advantage bar go more and more in one player's favor. It's just like the super myopic way of analyzing a Magic game. But yeah, they have to try to articulate it to a normal audience. But unfortunately, I don't think you can. I think those games just can't do it based on the way they're designed. But Marvel Snap, I think, has potential because of that. Let's jump into... Oh, go ahead, Moyen, before we...
Just one more thing about at least the current viewing experience that I feel like if I'm tuning into a tournament is that it's hard to evaluate what's actually going on. So you see the cards in play and the cards in maybe one player's hand, and if they're doing a lot of work, maybe 2 players' hand. But one thing that would also help is like knowing both player stacks. Or have to have them be displayed somewhere. But most tournaments don't do that yet, and I think it would help a lot in following what's going on.
Mm-hmm. I want to...
Yeah, as is when you're doing casting, you have to be like, are they playing around this? Are they playing around this? And like once you know that the deck lists are open and what they're looking at, it's very easy to get in someone's head in Marvel Snap. And that is actually an advantage. Like you talk about like how there's like a little bit less competitive or a little bit less depth to it, right? But like that lack of depth allows you to look at a stream if you see the deck right there and be like, oh, that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely they're like it's like an upsides and downsides thing.
Yeah, it definitely helps a lot in the casting side. I'm about to cast the Flesh and Blood World Championships here in 2 weeks, and we cast without that. We do have deck knowledge, but no hand knowledge in a very hand knowledge based game.
Wait, you have no hand? How does that?
No, but
you have no. Oh, because like you're looking at paper, and they're like
we look down on the board. Honestly, I have a very special ability of being able to see 1 pixel of an art and then recognize it. I don't know why I was just born with it, but I'll snipe them out of their hands as they flash them.
Oh my God, that must be a nightmare. Having to cast and being like, well, based on the gameplay, I think he's holding.
He's holding 4 of 80 cards that are listed on this deck list.
He's representing this, but it could also be this. You must never make definitive statements.
I feel like then the casters have to be better at the game than the players to actually make hand reads on that.
Let's go with that. The casters are better than the players.
Yeah, you're right.
That's not what I said.
Yeah. Let's go with that. I want to. You know
what they say? Those who can cast, those who can't play. Right? Like that. Those who can, they go for the casting jobs. If you're elite, you go do casting. Why would you want to compete in a tournament when you could be casting it?
If I ever start streaming, that's going to be a soundbite for subs or something. I want to harken back to Twitter here and ask you guys, what are your thoughts on closed versus open deck lists in Marvel Snap? Moyen,
open deck lists are easier for me. Sorry, I went first.
Sorry, you guys always like have this little silent dance of like who's going to go first. So.
Open deck lists are better for me because they let me play around things better. They let you leverage play skill better. The worse I am at the game, the more I want closed deck lists. Yeah, the more of a filthy net decker I am, the more I want open.
So always when you say closed deck list, in closed deck list the better player wins more because they know what your player want. And then people come with this argument where they say, oh, but that it's also a skill like figuring out what could be in my opponent's deck based on these cards and like speculating. And of course that's also a skill, but it's a skill that's a lot higher variance. And if they could still have a card that like wouldn't normally be in their deck, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then some people say,
I just want to clarify something. You said at the beginning of the sentence, you said enclosed deck lists. You meant an open deck list, right?
What did I say?
An open deck list, the better player wins more?
Yeah, an open deck list, the better player wins more.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. My bad. And yeah, then also some people, so their opinions are also valid, but some of them, they think it's exciting to lose to like a random card that you weren't expecting. And to me, that's not exciting at all. Like, if that can happen, I don't want to play the game. Actually, I've been doing quite well in tournaments, right? But I don't think I've signed up for a single closed deck list tournament, and I don't think I will.
I will offer an alternative opinion. It's not my opinion, right? It's the opinion of What Am I? Because I talked to him about this yesterday. He ran a pretty off-meta deck into the Snap Fan Open, right? It's a Hitmonkey She-Hulk Moon Girl deck. He's been a She-Hulk Moon Girl truther for like 2 months now. And the deck lists were closed in the first in the Swiss rounds of the tournament. He went 8-0. They were open in the top 8. He ended up losing in the finals. And selfishly, his answer was, I think I do better in closed deck lists because I am a brewer. Because he is like it sort of I think the argument would be it rewards different skills, right? And the skills that it rewards are being willing to brew and take something off meta that you think you can gain an advantage with in closed deck lists. Although, to be fair, he did say he thought his deck was also very good in open deck lists, but like it's the kind of thing that like once your opponent knows exactly what you're doing and can really identify like, oh, if I just like leech them, like if I just like play everything for leech, I can handle this, right? Like that there are like these little flashes of insight that you get where in open deck lists that you probably wouldn't in closed. And I think I just wanted to present that as, I don't want to sit here and be like, this is the only way to play Marvel Snap, because I do think there are different skills tested in open deck lists. But I definitely agree that the idea of like intuiting what your opponent is playing is not one of those skills. Guessing what they are on and then losing to whatever other card they are playing as a juke, that is not fun. I can confirm that.
And then you're like, oh, I could play around Polaris against this Shuri deck, and like 95% of Shuri decks should probably play Polaris, but maybe this guy doesn't. And it's like, okay.
Our draft decks were closed yesterday, and so I had this experience on the exact bad end, which is to say, like, I made some plays, and then Binks dropped a 1/5 Miles Morales on me because I played an Iron Fist, right? It's like, oh, that's great. I played a play that was like, well, he played a 4-cost card behind that Invisible Woman, so it's probably a Miles Morales. I'll play to beat the Miles Morales, and then it was a Super Scroll, and I lost. And it was just like, oh, well, I didn't know he had that. It's like, cool.
Also in battle mode, so they win a couple cubes because of that surprise element, and that would be okay. But in battle mode, if you're down 4 to 6 cubes, like you have almost no chance of winning the round. Like, it's really bad.
Like once you get down in battle mode,
so
it's tough.
I could see both sides of that argument, to be fair. I could see there being people who are playing off-meta decks who are like, it's more fun to be closed because I do get to juice some cubes, and that's the benefit I get for playing underpowered out-of-meta cards, which is potentially what they are. One thing, though, that I think is going to be universally negative, and something that closed deck list does reward in a longer Swiss round tournament, is scouting. So that's a big thing in paper tournaments, but digital tournaments, easy money on the scouting. It's just, so basically what scouting is, if you don't know what it is, so like, let's say we play round one, the people, someone's on a feature match, but let's even say your friend was playing player B. You get paired against player B round 2, your friend goes, by the way, he's playing Kang, so if he snaps you on turn 5, it's just a bluff snap. Most likely. Now you know that. It's totally unfair advantage, but scouting happens all the time in paper tournaments because they are closed deck lists, at least in the Swiss round. So it would definitely happen in something like Snap. I don't think it's rampant, but just keep in mind that's definitely a negative.
It's very big. It's also So at this moment I wasn't even considering it. I was much preferring open deck list, but considering that, it's also really, really bad for tournaments. This scouting thing is that no one wants to be streamed. If you're streamed, people know your deck. So, but you want the tournament to be streamed. That's a big point of tournaments. And then, let's say I often play tournaments and stream them on my own channel. So if I would do that in closed deck list, people could also just watch my VOD or watch me live and just see what decks I'm playing. That's just an unfair disadvantage that I don't think anyone should have for being streamed.
It's the opposite of the tournaments as content model. It's tournaments as the opposite of content. It's tournaments as a goal in themselves, right? Like that's the underpinning of this is like it's this idea of, I guess I would say, the underpinning of closed deck lists as a way of getting underrepresented decks to show up. Yeah. The idea would be to encourage off-meta plays because you hate the meta or whatever. To encourage brewers because you want to see cool things like that. And it's almost the opposite. Like it's almost the opposite because of the knock-on effects that it has on streaming, right? Yeah. Which is you basically can't.
So as a caster for Flesh and Blood, we end up picking a lot of the feature matches. And at major tournaments, at Pro Tours, at Worlds, it is not uncommon for players to deny being on coverage for the specific reason that it's not that their deck often is a surprise, but 1, 2, 3, 4 cards, silver bullet cards sometimes, right? Like sideboard cards, in Flesh and Blood, they're not sideboard, they're pre-board. It's best of one. So it's a big deal. They will not want to be on stream because, your deck will get scouted. I know we have some people that play Magic a lot that listen to this, but I will recount this story, and I don't know all the details, but there was a team in Magic that actually had someone who wasn't playing the tournament that would go around and scout decks. That was a part of Magic professional play, I believe, for big teams. And it's just like, it's hilariously bad. The other solution is like not totally great, like open deck lists or Swiss rounds might be logistically like a pain, but it is something that happens. It is an advantage. And when you look at high level tournaments, you put things on the line and there are advantages to be gained, players will take those advantages. You can call it cheating or not, but if it's not against the rules, players will take those advantages.
Yeah, players will take every advantage they get. But in digital card games, I don't feel like Swiss open deck list is that hard to do. You just have a spreadsheet with the decks and you're kind of done.
Yeah, definitely. Moyen, I want to ask you, since you've been crushing these tournaments, which are battle mode, I just want to ask you a little bit about battle mode in terms of how do your strategies differ at all in games of battle mode versus ladder, and what are some things that you employ in games of battle mode that potentially other players aren't utilizing, some advantages?
I think they're very similar, except the thing that we talked about. Ladder is closed deck list. But other than that, you always just play for maxi. If you're trying to climb, you just play for maxi V on ladder as well. And if you do that's the same thing you're doing in battle mode. We could talk about, if you know your opponent, maybe you know how much respect to give them or what level of plays they would go for. But that could also be the case on ladder.
Yeah, you talked about for the tournament. I know this isn't specific to battle, but you knocked for the tournament. You played against D-Money and you practiced beforehand, anticipating what decks he might bring, right?
Yeah, so I put them on either of 3 decks because last tournament in New York they played Dinosaur. Okay, now I remember a nice story to tell. But okay, they played Dinosaur in that one, and then the kind of evolution of that deck is maybe they play Dino plus Darkhawk because it's the better version of the deck in my opinion. Or there was the third option. Maybe they just want to showcase the new card, and the only deck that really fits in was C2. And they also played C2 on their very last stream before the tournament. So I put them in either of those 3 decks.
Scouting. He did scouting in closed deck lists.
Yeah, but that's different. And it actually all of those 3 decks involve very important ongoings, which is why I ended up with the deck that included Rogue to give me a little bit of an edge. And also it meant that those decks don't really play Cosmo, so I ended up playing a deck that's really good against no Cosmo. But there was on the champs from Hearthstone, I did a lot of scouting, and it was kind of unreasonable scouting. But are you aware of the Conquest format?
Yeah.
Should we explain it for?
Go ahead, explain.
I'm trying to remember it. That's the one. Is that the one that had sideboard cards, or is that the one where you had to like beat all your opponent's decks?
Yeah, you have to get one win with all of your decks, right?
Okay, yeah, I remember that one.
That's the one. And objectively, in if your opponent randomizes their queue order in a conquest format, it doesn't matter what deck you're queuing at what time.
Correct.
The percentages are the same. But people still have tendencies, and they don't always randomize their queue order. And
you scouted the tendencies?
Yeah, well, I was playing against a Chinese player, so we didn't have the most info, but I actually went to Chinese tournaments on the, what's the Chinese Google? I went through that and found the tournaments and looked at in what order they're queuing their decks. And they were actually, they actually had one of the tendencies that was the most popular, which is the deck that's the most well positioned against your opponent's 3 decks, which it was 3 decks and a ban. Oh, 4 decks and then one of them was banned. So the decks that most well positioned, they were basically always queuing first. And then based on that, I queued my deck that's the best against their deck that's most well positioned, which did give me a few extra percentages. But also I made an entire. My math wasn't even good enough to do it, but I had someone help me make an entire spreadsheet of which player queues what deck at what time, what's the actual percentage of me winning the set or my opponent winning the set. So then it was also not just, okay, we have this read, but also how much of an edge or risk is it to do a
I was going to ask, is
read.
that actually a plus EV proposition? Or how, when you make a call like that, this is something I actually want to dive into because I think it relates to, when you make a call like that and you say, I think based on these tendencies that you are going to do it again, what sort of downside risk chance do you assign to that? And I would say, I'd like to draw an analogy here to, plays on the last turn of Marvel Snap. When if you have a play that beats 80% of plays, but they know you have a play that beats 80% of plays, what sort of downside risk do you assign to making the read and playing on that next level? Do you assign any downside risk to it?
The biggest downside is if your opponent is on that level, or maybe I do the spreadsheet with someone and somehow the information slips out and my opponent gets to know that I'm doing this, that I'm trying to exploit their tendencies, and then they could just punish me for that. And so instead of having randomized queue orders where maybe it wouldn't change the win rate of the set, they could actually punish me. So I guess that's the same thing. In Snap, it's also sometimes doing a next level play can expose you to other plays that they only do because they didn't even have the card that you're playing around in their hand. And then that's also a downside to trying to go on the next level if that makes you lose to other plays, which they could do if they didn't draw card X.
Mm-hmm.
But you would still recommend doing it, right? You still would make those calls given that you are opening yourself up to losing to new things. You would still think this is the right thing to do.
It depends on the situation. There's some situations where I'm like, I could go on this next level, but it would open myself up to losing to so many different plays that I don't actually think it's worth it. So it's situational, but I tend to try to go on that level.
Because I've definitely noticed that about your play. I feel like you're kind of dancing around it, but you make those plays probably more than anybody. You make more plays that beat 20% of the range, but that 20% is exactly what they played than I think anyone I've ever seen.
But also, if you're listening to the podcast and now you're playing differently against me, I will find out and I will play differently.
There's a parallel to paper card games. Specifically Flesh and Blood. I know it happens in Magic in regards to metagaming and figuring out what deck to bring to the tournament. Flesh and Blood in particular because it's best of 1, and you'll be pre-boarding instead of sideboarding best 2 out of 3. So the metagame is you either play the deck, or you play the deck that beats the deck, or you play the deck that beats the deck that beats the deck. Obviously, there's layers after that, but, part of that is you can end up metagaming yourself out of the tournament, right? You can bring a deck that's just terribly positioned against the best deck because you thought everybody would bring layer 2, which is the counter deck. We have a heuristic in Flesh and Blood, which is it's always simpler than you think. Because I can't tell you how many high-level tournaments I've walked into with some wacky deck that beats all the counters to the best deck, and 50% of these kids showed up on the best deck because it's just the best.
See, that's the thing, right? That's how I play. I play the simple way, right? That's how I'm going to play the play that beats the range, right? And that's why Moyen beats my ass. Because I am very easy to read. And it's one of those things that I just need to work on in terms of like, it's not even like so much working on is like, I have awareness of it. So it probably won't be like that in the future. But like, that is one of those things where it's like, if you are always on level 1, like the way it was described to me when I first read about these concepts is like your average, to go back to Magic, like a PTQ grinder is on level 1, right? And that's about how good you need to be right now to be good at Marvel Snap, right? You just have to be able to play on level 1. Just make the best plays in the situation that you're in, and don't even worry or think about like reads or whatever that. And the issue with being on level 1, of course, is anyone who's good enough to do that and also make the reads is going to beat you all the time. And like, there's one thing that I had to learn. I actually had to learn this in Snap, is I had to, because I played so many bots, I got into this headspace of like, I have to make perfect reads, right? I have to do these like insanely optimal things every time. It puts you on perma level 1. And so when I would play against humans, I would be like, all right, well, they could do this, they could do this, they could do this. I need to. And I would just like go in circles. And so one of the things that I had to learn to actually become good was like, hey, dumb it down. Just make the good play. Like, just make the good play. And now we're going back to like, all right, it's time to ramp that back up. And I'm really happy for that.
Also, for the tournament level thinking, like what deck list you're bringing, if you bring like best deck or the one that beats it or the one that beats that, like you always have to like evaluate the participants, but it's not easy to do, and it's a lot of speculation involved because the same person could go for either of these strategies. But we actually had a like somewhat scandalous thing for Hearthstone, which involved Battlefy, and it made it somewhat
was this when
interesting.
People's deck lists got posted early?
Yeah,
no, I remember this.
So it was a tournament in Las Vegas, and I go to sleep, and like 4 a.m. someone calls me and tells me the deck lists have been leaked and they've been data mined, and now everyone's deck list that they would have been playing tomorrow, the deck submission was next morning, are available to anyone that knows about this. But a lot of people knew about this, and then it created this mind.
How many people ended up? What percentage of the field would you say switched decks?
The tournament winner
like
was on a
plus,
different
right?
deck before they knew about this, and yeah, it's like you want to switch, but also how many are going to switch was.
How many layers do you go though? Do you switch to beat the decks that were represented in the leak, or do you switch to beat the decks that are responding to what was leaked? Right? Do you go layer 3?
I think you flip a coin. I think you fully randomize.
I just went to be good against the field that was leaked because I didn't expect that many people to see the leak in the middle of the night while being jet lagged, but. Quite some people
apparently everyone did anyway.
Yeah.
You underestimate how Insomniac card game players are, which is weird considering like your own tendencies.
Yeah, you would also underestimate how fast they will script. Yeah, so in Flesh and Blood, in particular, I know we to Pro Tour #1 we brought a deck that was very unusual and it was very well positioned, but it took about 1 sideboard slot for the deck to be literally unplayable. And man, that thing got out like 10 minutes before, and I saw people running to stands. Yeah. And funny too is like on that Pro Tour, I didn't make day 2, so I played in. There was another like high level tournament the day after for people that didn't make it. And when I played that tournament, every single opponent I played against had like 5 sideboard cards for my deck. Just like. The last thing I want to ask you, Moyen, is can you give the listeners any tips regarding snapping and the strategies that you implement on like when to snap in a game?
Sure, but 1 second, I just wanted to add to the incident where Battlefy actually made an official statement, and it contained the sentence that it had no impact on the outcome or the tournament. And that was memed on so much because like there were so many changed decks. It was won by a different deck, and they're like, no, it didn't have an impact.
It had no impact.
Yeah.
No, none.
Okay, so on snapping, what can you improve on snapping? Because these questions are always hard because basically every situation is somewhat different.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Let's try to give some guidelines. one thing we can talk about is in battle mode, there's breakpoints of cubes that matter and cubes that don't. After game 4, you start playing for 2 cubes, and then if you like on an odd number of cubes, that one cube you lost doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So it sometimes can change when you should snap. Yesterday, I watched back my rounds, and then I think Binks said that they always snap if the opponent's on 2 cubes and the stakes aren't increased yet. And I don't think it's not, at least not optimal. Maybe it's fun to bully your opponent, but for example, in that spot, I think I was, how many cubes did I have? So my opponent was on 2 cubes, and after this round the stakes increase, and I think I was on an even amount of cubes. So basically, if I lose this 1 cube, it also doesn't matter. But as soon as I snap, I make this game matter. And if I don't want this game to matter, I would rather be the one retreating than snapping my opponent just because they're on low HP.
Yeah, it's interesting because D Money expounded on a similar thing when he was doing guest commentary for Best of the Besties, and that's actually who you ended up playing against. And I noticed it happen in you were up like, I don't know, it was like 8-0. You just snapped. It was like 8-2. Mm-hmm. You snapped, and D Money is a big believer that one cube gives him a free retreat, right? And so he was like, if he's on 2 cubes and your opponent is snapping, he's like, all right, I'm out of here. I'll play the rest of these games for 2 cubes. That's just that is what it is. That's how high stakes works, right?
Yeah, but if you think you're ahead, you should be wanting to play for those 2.
Yeah.
Because
he did.
The next game you might have.
But the way he thinks about it is like, if he has a bad hand, he could just like dip out of those games.
Yeah, it actually happened like both ways. I think once I didn't snap, and then they snapped, I retreated for 1, and then the second time it went the other way around, and then
that is how it happened.
They were just ordered.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the player base, and I know Cam and I have talked about this in some podcasts, is, they are kind of stuck in the loop of boomer snapping, right? They snap on turn 5 or turn 6, sorry, simultaneous turns, when they're significantly ahead. How do you feel about snapping before then? Like, what cards and like what kind of cards do you draw when you snap, and how early do you snap? Like let's say like back in the day of Zabu, like you have Zabu in hand. Are you snapping on 2? Like, are you snapping on 3 when you're playing Zabu?
He didn't play Zabu.
I didn't play the meta.
Of course, the one deck.
I can still relate.
If you draw Shuri,
that's
and
not a
you're
reason
ahead
to
on
snap.
tempo.
Yeah, then
you're
I
ahead
snap,
on tempo,
course.
and you draw Shuri, and you're just like, okay, yeah, I'm just gonna do this, right? Like,
yeah. So basically, if I think I'm ahead, but there's a lot of things that go into it. There's the matchup that you're playing. There's the cards that you're drawing, and there's even more than that. There's the locations on the board. Oftentimes, the locations that get revealed, they don't. I mean, they do set the tone for how the game is going to go. You starting at the locations, you can make plans and estimates of what your chances of winning are a lot better. And there's some locations where you're like, this means, okay, very easy example. There's a location that pops up. Let's say you can play cards here, and you have like Mr. Fantastic, your opponent doesn't. That's a reason to snap. That's a very easy one. But there's other locations that maybe slightly favor you, but that favor you enough that you want to snap. Also, some people think snapping before the third location's revealed, or before all locations are revealed, is risky, and you shouldn't do it. But I don't view it like that. If the first 1 or first 2 locations mean you're ahead, and in open deck list, your opponent also, if you know you're ahead just because of the location, your opponent also knows they're behind, you should snap. You don't want a favorable location for them to flip up and them to see that. They have to pay if they want to see the location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's a big thing.
I remember, I can't remember the streamer's name, but the idea of making your opponent pay additional cubes to see more cards, right? So snapping early as soon as you perceive advantage to make your opponent also have to pay the ante to see additional cards, and you're assuming that your risk is lower because you perceived your hand to be sort of fundamentally powerful based off what your deck's potential is. So even before the flip of the last location. But yeah, you're right. It's a hard question to answer because ultimately the answer is it depends. It does depend.
Yeah.
It depends on your opponent.
I think I still remember a lot of things to say that actually matter. So we talked earlier about representing cards, right? And I think I did that a lot in the KM Best tournament, for example, where it was the more I won, the more Shuri mirrors I had to play. And in the Shuri mirror, it's just a good example, but it can apply to other decks as well. I was doing a lot of plays where I was representing a hand that I didn't have, that I knew so I was trying to represent a hand that I know my opponent is like almost impossible to beat for them. And they can't stay because they know they're losing to it in most situations. So there was, for example, times I had Shuri, I didn't have Red Skull, I didn't have She-Hulk. And I could do some play that maybe increases my chance to win the game if my opponent stays on turn 5. But I can also pass, and my opponent, if I think my opponent will not have a chance to beat the She-Hulk plus something on the final turn, and I can still even snap on that. And even if I don't have there was one time I did it, and I ended up top decking the She-Hulk, and my opponent retreated. But my opponent retreated. It didn't matter that I top decked the She-Hulk that I was playing for. It just mattered that my opponent thinks I could have it, or that my opponent puts me on having it. He probably thinks I have it, and they can't stay.
Bluff snapping.
I think that represents something about how you think about your opponents, right? Because I don't think a lot of other Marvel Snap players have enough respect for their opponents. And you have enough respect for your opponents that you're like representing these things and expecting them to pick up on it, right? And like that's the kind of thing that if you have a bad read on your opponent, if they're just not good enough to pick up what you're putting down, right? Or it's also a situation where you playing Shuri, a deck with very defined play patterns that everyone at this point is familiar with, allows you to do that. If you can't just do this in any context. The fact that you're playing a deck that people are like, oh god, here's the thing again. They sort of primed themselves for this almost.
Yep. There was also one game yesterday where I was so ahead against D-Money, and I had like I think one inverted card top deck at least, and they stayed for some reason. I don't know if that was maybe because the deck I was playing.
You're talking about
is like
game
so
one.
Meta.
You're talking about game one.
I think it was game one. And I
was
so
remember this because
confused
both Binks and I were like, D-Money should probably leave. He played a Mr. Negative on turn 3.
And I was already winning another lane. It was like, even if I have the worst, I don't think you could come up with a hand that I could have that wasn't beating that play. Which
I looked at it. That was the game where you ended up playing, I think, 2 Iron Men.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, well. And then I looked at it and I was like, no matter where he played that Iron Man.
Yeah, it didn't matter.
One Iron Man wins that game.
Yes, and I top decked Mystique and I was like, okay, I guess that's good, but I was winning anyways.
Yes, like it was just like one Iron Man wins that game at 3. I do think what D-Money might have missed there was that the Iron Man was at 3. But I don't. He might have put you on. He might have put you on just like he doesn't have 3 on the Iron Man. But then you had 3 power Iron Man, 3 power Mystique. It was like, okay, well that sucks.
A lot of our listeners probably don't play a lot of battle mode at this point. Do you implement bluff snapping while playing ladder? And if you are in bot ELO and maybe you don't get to play a lot of ladder, do you think that bluff snapping is appropriate in a ladder environment?
I mean, you have to do the maths on it usually on what's plus EV and what isn't. Like, how often do you think your opponent's retreating on this, and versus how often are they staying and actually beating my bluff snap? But bluff snapping doesn't have. I think bluff snapping people always think about turn 6. It doesn't have to be turn 6. You can also bluff snap earlier, and then your opponent still retreats turn 6 because they think you have the key card or something.
Yeah.
Also, you really think he wouldn't be in body low? Come on now.
That's why I figured. It's why I asked that question. I'm like, oh god, this question is just irrelevant.
Month, I'm trying so hard not to be in body low, but it's not really working. I'm doing drafted decks to infinite only, and I'm at 85 now. But biggest reason I'm having any progress is probably I'm facing a bot every now and then. It's really, really hard with drafted decks.
I will say draft decks. I learned that lesson. I learned the lesson of the draft.
I am allowing myself to change 1 card each draft to a pool 3 or lower card. But so
I'm just like slapping Thanos in it. You can't.
I can't do that. Yeah. But I actually have Thanos in my current draft. But most of my drafts ended up me just picking some no ability cards and then putting Patriot in, and that's been my biggest success in drafts so far.
You ruined your own format.
Yeah. I've had two drafts. One of them I had Patriot and then I added Ultron, and that was my win con. And the other one I had Ultron and then I put in Patriot, And then in the last one, all I had was Nick Fury, but I pulled off the Nick Fury into Ultron once.
Oh my god! You've made your own format into like we're gonna play Bad Patriot.
Yeah, but maybe some drafts I will find something better to do, but most of them have boiled down.
No, it does seem like that might be the optimal play there based on how the Draftinator works. Yeah.
In my first, also I'm playing the draft that takes always 50 games. In my first draft, I went like minus 40 cubes, and I almost wanted to stop the challenge, but I'm back up now.
In regards to bluff snapping on ladder, I kind of agree with a take that I heard from Jeff Hoogland, which was it's incorrect on ladder because it's low stakes poker. It's like it's kitchen poker with your family, where people are just going to stay in to see what happens, right? And most of the time when you bluff snap, you're just going to get juiced if you genuinely don't have it. People tend not to retreat. I think it's a little bit different if you're not in bot ELO and you're in that weird ELO where you play the same 5 to 10 players like through rank 80 to 100. Maybe you can juice them with some bluffs, but outside of that, I think that's probably mostly incorrect. Moyen, I want to end with what are your sort of your future goals and plans in regards to Marvel Snap?
I want to improve my content, but also I want to have more content because right now, every now and then I get burned out by ladder, and then sometimes I do only do like one stream a week or something, and I think I could be doing much better if I was more consistent with what I'm doing. So I'm trying to do that, but also I'm looking to explore new ways of content, maybe more collabs. Could be fun. If we get official tournaments and esports for Snap at some point in the future, I probably try to sign for like some esports org, play for them. And until then, I'm probably just farming cash tournaments because they're so free. I think. Wait, in the last.
You hear that, everyone? He just said they're all free.
Yeah.
That clip, run that clip on repeat.
You got to put the hat on.
If he ever loses.
Yeah, you
I did lose my last tournament.
Do your wrestling voice with a call to action.
I'm not doing the wrestling voice. I do have.
Because I think the tournament thing hasn't been going on for that long, right? I think in the last like 2 months, I made like 400 to 500 just on farming cash tournaments. It's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah, and I think those prize pools, if Second Dinner gets involved, we start seeing some official tournaments, they're gonna drastically increase as well.
Most of that prize pool is just the game best out of it. The 200.
I lost so much money on that tournament.
It's content though. It's the model we talked about.
Yeah, no, I gotta do it. I gotta. I don't feel like I content optimized it the way I could have, but it was a sub goal. I owed it to the community.
I wonder how many people sub to play in the tournament.
Not enough to offset the costs, because I basically was like, I'm gonna lose money on this just to make the tournament real, right?
Yeah.
That was the idea. I didn't want it to just be a tournament that happened. I wanted it to be a tournament where people could look at the results and be like, oh no, that's actually like something that matters, right?
Yeah.
And so that meant that I had to put a specific number on it that ended up probably overshooting the mark in that context, but
I think the number was
whatever. Yeah. Enjoy my money, Moyen. It was a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this very much.
I do want to pitch something. There's a thing that Day9 does where it's like a pro-am thing where he like Day9 learns Dota was the thing that he did. Get like a pro to do that with him. I want to do that, but with like a rotating cast of pros, right? And I want you to be one of those pros if that ever ends up happening. If they ever fix ladder, that would be super ideal. That would be a super ideal place for that content. So I'm still holding out hope that they will fix the ladder at some point soon, but I'm interested in doing content like that, and I think you'd be a great person for that. I know you mentioned collabs, so I wanted to.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Well,
honestly, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would.
Everybody says that. Bing said that as well.
Is that?
No, this is my first time doing podcast. I was being nervous, but this went very well, and you were very nice to me.
No, I don't know. I always just get on here. People seem to think that like I perform like I'm not like this, but the thing is that I am exactly this person 100% of the time. So it's like I'm not the kind of person where I will even, no matter who I'm talking to, I'm exactly this guy. And so I guess I wonder if that's why. I think what they're actually saying when they say that is, KM, you're very genuine. Brendan, you're very good at everything, right? I think it's the you. I think it's the you part of it, because you come on and you have this very clear sense of how to direct a conversation, and they expect it to be me just bullshitting, but instead it's you, a pro.
Let me let you behind the curtain and what happens every time we have a guest on. We get in a group chat. I send them notes 1 hour before, and I say, here's the notes. Don't look at them. We're not going to follow them.
Yeah, no one reads the notes.
That's literally what I said.
What do you mean? I read the notes.
Moyen read the notes. Moyen, this is an important character beat. Moyen had notes on the notes.
Yeah, I put down notes on everything that I could go about these talking points. I thought that's normal. Also, for the show match, I ended up practicing until almost 4 a.m. when it didn't really matter, and I didn't end up playing the deck that I thought was going to be best in the format. But for some reason, I thought it was good usage of my time.
I am about the show match. We had Super Skrull in the Patriot list, and I regret taking him out so much.
It would have been so good.
I regret it so much. I should have taken my boy Super Skrull. I should have trusted in my boy.
Yeah. Speaking to the collab content, just from myself, there's almost no YouTube content that appeals to me as a Marvel Snap player, because I'm on the cusp of, I hit Infinite. I know how to play the game. I can go look at what a streamer's playing, go hang out on Cam's channel and watch for a little bit if I don't understand a deck. But there's nothing out there that will help me get from that level to the top level. So I think that content is very appealing for those players.
Yeah,
and
that's sort of...
There's no content there. So I would love to see that. And I'm actually, Moyen, you mentioned that you have on your YouTube channel an analysis of your finals, which
it was really good.
1 hour long, going through all the plays.
It is an hour long, and I will tell you, the games themselves were not an hour long.
No, I paused a lot to talk about stuff. So I think my content on YouTube will probably be mostly that content that you're looking for, but also I don't know how often I'm posting, because they are a lot of effort, and also I have to edit them myself, and I'm really bad at it.
Yeah.
Yes. I would not have a YouTube if I did not pay someone to edit for me. I would not exist, because
I would pay someone if I had money.
I have a job, right? So I have a job, and then I have the content stuff, and it's just I have to if I want to get on YouTube, I need to make sacrifices in terms of the money, because I literally don't have the time to do the editing. I cannot do it.
It's also an investment. It'll pay off in the future, trust me. with the editing.
Will it?
Oh yeah,
that's news to me. Right now we're at break even, which is cool.
Okay, that's really
cool
good.
If
it's break even, that's perfect.
I'm happy with it. Yeah.
Speaking of content, Moyen, what is your YouTube channel name? Your Twitter is on screen, Moyen_HS. Where can people find you? Twitch. What are you up to?
Plug yourself.
My YouTube is Moyen Snap, because I did it after I play. So I'm only doing Snap content on there, and I never had a YouTube before, so I just called it Moyen Snap. The Twitch and the Twitter is the same. I think it's Moyen_HS. And I might change that at some point, but Moyen is taken. And I don't know if I want the Snap plug yet.
They don't have the conviction. It's just Moyen_historical card game player. That's what they
historic. Moyen history. He's call it the History Channel.
Yeah.
Wait, that's taken. Damn.
Awesome. Well, again, appreciate you coming on. Closing out, we don't have a review this week, but if you do listen to the podcast and you do enjoy it, a review is the best thing that you can do for us. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/snapshot, or you can go on Apple Podcasts. That one helps in particular the most. Cam and I are on Twitter. I'm at Brendan APG. Cam's at CamBestMS. He's also streaming pretty frequently. He is, of course, Infinite, but playing some battle mode, having fun, throwing on tournaments. Cam, where can they find you, and what's your current schedule?
That's going to be at KMBestMS on Twitch. And my current schedule is actually a little bit up in the air. One of the things I want to keep doing more is more tournament watching streams, more reviews of that kind of thing. My community has been really loving that kind of stuff, and I think it's a nice break. And so I'm thinking about adding a Sunday stream on, and that will necessitate maybe no Mondays or whatever. I don't really know exactly yet. I know today, we're recording on Sunday, breaking kayfabe here. I'm probably going to go live later today, so that will be on the heels of the Snap battle yesterday. So it'll be like content creation on both days. One thing about the Snap battle, by the way, I should say, I tried to figure out the tech to get it so I could stream the Snap battle on my channel and also my perspective once that happened. But by the time we actually got close to starting, it became clear the tech solutions weren't there for that yet. But hopefully they will be in the future if that ever happens again. I am sad I wasn't able to put that on my channel on Saturday, but it should be not be a norm. I will be there on Saturdays on any days where I'm not doing a Snap battle.
Awesome. Well, if you are listening to this, speaking of YouTube, there is a video version of this at youtube.com/@the_snapshot. And yeah, that's it for this week, Moyen. We really appreciate you coming on. It's really cool to speak to somebody that is, I mean, I know it's early days, but on the cutting edge of the competitive scene, doing as well as you are. It's just great to hear what Marvel Snap is from your perspective. Like, I know I heard a few tidbits on that. I just hadn't really thought about the game that way before. So it's awesome to hear from you. I'm excited to see sort of what your content involves into and what tournaments you'll be taking down in the future. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
I love being here. I had a good
Thanks.
time.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.